Hi, this is Ron Huxley with ParentingToolbox.com, and I want to talk to you a little bit about children who can't seem to deal with change. Do you have a child that, whenever there's a transition or a change in our routine, tends to become very dysregulated and overwhelmed? There are some children that, even when we have really fun things like summer vacation or grandma coming over or there's the holidays, just they tend to become very dysregulated and they become easily, they tantrum, they can't seem to follow normal directions, and then that lasts even for days or weeks after that event. It can be very challenging for parents during the holidays because of all the changes that keep happening, and they don't want to miss out on these situations, but they don't know how to handle them either. Well, this really is something that we need to talk about when it comes to understanding what's called the window of tolerance. And so, the window of tolerance is where we engage with other people and are able to maintain a sense of self control and emotional stability when interacting with other people. When children have been through trauma or have gone through in utero drug exposure or have had some other type of psychologically damaging situation occur to them, even if it was early on in life before they even remember it, these things can become ingrained within the body and in the brain so that they will engage in protective reaction to any stimulus, whether it's good or it's bad. And this is what happens when children become either hyper aroused or hypo aroused. I had a clinical supervisor who once told me, Ron, there are really two kinds of children. There are those children who are too tightly wound and those children who are not wound up enough. And even though it is a stereotype, I think it is fairly accurate that some of the children that I work with who have been through trauma will actually be hyper aroused. They will engage in overstimulation, increased sensations, the sensory systems become hostile to them when they engage in a change of their circumstances, their event. And sometimes this event can be as simple as having to get ready for school in the morning. I mean, we're not talking just big things like Christmas or life-changing events like maybe a death in the family or having to move, but it could be anything that can get them outside of the routine and they become immediately distressed and dysregulated. So they become very emotionally reactive. That's a very common hallmark of children who've been traumatized or abused, is to have emotional reactivity. They can have very disorganized cognitive processes because when we're flooded with emotion and our limbic system, our emotional centers of our brain are hyper aroused, it is like sending a warning signal to the body that danger is near and you can't think straight. So this is why so many of our kids who go to school tend to have problems in the classroom, who tend to be constantly out of their seat or talking or interrupting or disruptive in some way, or can't seem to learn and focus during the school days because as they are getting a bombardment of information into their body that they can't process and that their body is actually interpreting as a distressing, dangerous event, they become very disorganized. You can't think when that happens. On the lower scale, you have the hypoaroused, excuse me, and the hypoaroused is basically where there's a shutting down of the system. This is where the body goes into a disabling or numbing of emotions and sensations in order to handle what again feels like danger coming into the body. It's a fight or flight circumstance where we tend to react by lashing out and become emotionally reactive or shutting down. And in this situation, we become disabled cognitively. We can't think. So you have a lot of kids who will tend to just kind of like the wheels start slowing as they're trying to think. And you ask them a question and they just kind of look down and they can't process the thoughts very quickly because it's like they've got a virus operating in the background of their nervous system, their operating system, and so they just become really slowed down. So they will have reduced physical sensory motor activity, whereas hyperarousal will have increased sensory motor activity. What we want to do is then take that window of tolerance and stretch it open. And the window of tolerance, by the way, I just want to give credit where credit is due. This term was coined by Dr. Daniel Siegel and Dr. Pat Ogden, who put this together. There are researchers from UCLA who did attachment research and attachment therapy. And so they came up with this idea of window of tolerance about how we can socially engage and manage our emotional reactivity to the world. So some of the things that I want to do is help children have a wider window of tolerance because it's so narrow banded in terms of how they can handle or tolerate situations. And it's so easy to go from hyperarousal or hypoarousal. This is why so many of our kids seem like they go from 0 to 60 over any little change. Tell them no, tell them it's time to turn off the television, get ready for bed, time to get ready for school, get their shoes on, and time for Christmas. So all these things can just be overwhelming to the child. What I want to do is I want to begin retraining the nervous system to have a greater window of tolerance. And we do this just like we do work with an infant. When we work with an infant, they cry and they're in distress state. A parent picks them up, soothes them, regulates them, determines what their needs are, and over time, their nervous system, through thousands and thousands of these types of interactions, becomes strengthened and they become able to then regulate themselves. That's i.e. self-control. And what we want to do the very same thing for children who have been through trauma or in utero drug exposure is we want to retrain their nervous system to get what they didn't get originally. And you can have a child who's 16, but chronologically, but 3 or 4 or 5 years old emotionally, socially. And so we're not just talking about young children when we talk about building a window of tolerance. We can talk about it with older children as well, maybe even some adults. I don't know. Actually, I've seen a few adults, so yeah, it is true. So we do this by alternating our schedule. We use the schedule, the very thing that is causing the most distress in the children. We want to use that to help them regulate. So what I mean by managing the schedule is that we want to, one, prepare them for changes that are coming up, give them a calendar, put things on a board, help them be predictable about what's going to happen throughout the day, but then make sure that we manage the schedule where we are alternating between energetic activities and calm, relaxing activities. From doing things that would be engaging the child into something exciting and fun, and then bring them down to a nurturing, limiting, calming activity that would be structured. So structure can also be a situation from unstructured to structure, from challenging, exciting to calm and nurturing. And we do this throughout the day, over and over again. We alternate up and down, up and down, up and down, literally retraining the nervous system to become more flexible so they can move back and forth and can experience what it feels like to get hyper-aroused and then calm down, but not hypo-aroused and locked down. And so there's this fluidity that occurs. I call this my slinky science. If I had a slinky here in my hands, you'd see what I'm talking about. A nice fluid reaction to my environment and widens my window of tolerance. And so a lot of kids, even we give them just a little bit of a challenge, they just go all the way to 60. From 0 to 60, they have a hard time managing a little bit. So we have to start controlling that schedule, just give them a little bit and then calming down again. Give them a little bit of excitement and then calming down again. Helping them do something challenging and then doing a nurturing, slower paced, relaxing, more structured activity. And we keep doing this until the child is able to build more and more tolerance, what I call NeuroResiliency, over time, a greater window of tolerance. And so this kind of slinky becomes very fluid and not one extreme or the other. So we can manage their schedule, something that we have total control over in their day. This will help the child then be able to experience what it feels like to have a regulated nervous system. We can also do this by a parenting tool called redos. Now, a redo is a situation where a parent sees a child who's distressed, slams a door, angry because they didn't get their way, or something didn't happen the way they wanted it to, or they're just upset. And then the parent would then go to them very calmly, say to the child, I need you to redo shutting that door so that we can shut it correctly. I want to make sure you know how to do it correctly. Of course, they're going to slam it again, and then we have them redo it again and again and again and again. And this is a principle, a behavioral principle called satiation. Basically, it means they get tired of the situation, it becomes boring, it's no fun. When that becomes no fun, then that is suddenly ingrained into a child's nervous system. Do you have a child who likes to always want to have fun? Kids who are in this situation of a very limited window of tolerance often always want fun, always want games, always want activity. It's almost like boredom is pain. And it's because their nervous system doesn't know how to tolerate it, doesn't know how to regulate itself. And so it's constantly in a state of hyperarousal, fight or flight, danger, danger inside the brain. But the brain is miscuing. It's telling the child that something is dangerous when it's not dangerous at all. And so we have to retrain the way of thinking, retrain the nervous system to tolerate it. So redos are really helpful. If they don't do the laundry, fold the laundry correctly, have them do it again, and then 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 again. You get what I'm saying? It becomes very boring. It's satiation. And you're also teaching something. You teach them how to fold it correctly. And next time, they will avoid that painful stimulus. It's not pain at all. It's just boredom. But they will avoid that. And also because their nervous system has now developed the skills of how to calm down and correctly do something, not rush through it, not slam the door out of anger. You get the point? It allows that child to train them how to do their nervous system correctly. We can also do this through an attachment parenting principle, which is basically when a child is in a very emotional distress state, crying, upset, angry, and maybe even if they're hypo-aroused. I think you do it with this as well, although it's more common to see it with hyper-aroused. But with hypo-aroused even, you go to a child and then you connect and then you redirect. You don't want to try to engage in a lot of words when a child is either hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused. That's not the moment to do it. You want to do it when their body regulates back into a window of tolerance, and then you can use more words. So when they're distressed, use this very short of words, even one word or one little line to try to communicate your need. You draw close to the child in the distress. You keep your words to a minimum. You use your prosody of voice, which is your tone of voice. And then once the child is calm, then you redirect. Then you can reason with them because, again, their cognition either is disorganized or it's disabled. And when they are in a more window of tolerance, then they're able to reason about what course of action they need. And then don't just tell a child what to do. It's really important that you get their thinking brain engaged. And so at this point, you want to ask the child, what do you think you should do to handle the situation? How can you clean up this mess that was made? What is it that you need to do to fix this problem? Or how can you help yourself? Or what do you need from me to help you? You want to ask questions because the questions engage the frontal lobes of the brain where cause and effect thinking happens, where they can do self-referential thought, which means they can see what their needs are and their desires are based on who they are and what's going on inside of them. And so they have a greater awareness of themselves. It's very metacognitive or very kind of meditation of sorts. It's a higher order thinking style, in other words. And what this does by asking questions encourages the child to be more aware of what their needs are. Another way of retraining the brain, retraining the nervous system to have a greater window of tolerance. Well, this is Ron Huxley with ronhuxley.com or parentingtoolbox.com, get you to the same place. And this is my little discussion on how to help increase a window of tolerance for children who have been traumatized, and it helps them manage change and transitions. Thank you very much.